Hello there, welcome to the Gibson House in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. My name is Howard Paul Short, and today is Thursday, January the 25th, 2018. I have Michael with me, who's going to tell us more about the house. Here we go.
Welcome to Gibson House. The house was built in 1851, and it was the residence of the Gibson family. Mr. Gibson is best remembered as being a politician and a surveyor in Upper Canada. The room we're in right now is the back parlor. It was essentially the family room. This is where they gather, socialize as a family, entertain themselves. There's a piano. We know Shakespeare is very popular in the Victorian period. It was a space for them to kind of be a family together and enjoy each other's company. Pictures of Mr. and Mrs. Gibson are on the wall. Mr. Gibson is on the bottom and top left. He was born in Scotland, but immigrated to Canada when he was 21 years old. Mrs. Gibson was born in New York State, but immigrated to Canada when she was 9 years old. Both are of Scottish origin, and that kind of tells a lot, or shows a lot about the values and the things they chose to be involved with here in Canada. Moving towards the front parlor, by mistake, is a room that's different for them. It was where Mrs. Gibson would entertain her guests. In the Victorian period, it was very important to kind of give appearances, basically. So they would try to do that. They have nicer furniture in the front parlor and the back parlor, and we mirrored that in our interpretation. We also have the iron stove in front of the fireplace, which is somewhat decorative. It's not a purely functional piece, so it would keep the upstairs very warm, and this room very warm. That wasn't the only purpose. And there's also the collection of seashells on the table beside the fireplace. It was very popular to collect kind of knick-knack kind of things that would have impressed your guests. Now, over the years, the varnish on these seashells have made them dark, but they would probably want them very colorful. If we head upstairs, we can have a look at the bedroom. This is our hired man's bedroom. The hired man's name was John Bosa, and he was responsible for looking after a lot of farm work. When Mr. Gibson was home, he would help out. He would actually take the lead on all the farming projects because he was an experienced farmer from his youth. But the vast majority of time, especially in spring, summer, and fall, he spent his time surveying. So this is the room Mr. Bosa had. It has a straw mattress and supported by ropes, which is where the term sleep tight comes from, because every so often you'd cinch up the ropes to keep it nice and tight and nice and comfortable. But other than this room, he really didn't have a lot of space inside the house. There was a separation between kind of the hired help and the family, so he wouldn't use the dining room, he wouldn't use the parlors, he would use the kitchen to eat, and he'd otherwise be outside or up here. And there's also a very big difference between how nice this room is versus the bedrooms. We'll go have a look at the family bedrooms. Alright. So this is the upstairs bedroom section of the house for the Gibsons. To my left is the girls' bedroom. The Gibsons had 7 children, 3 daughters and 4 sons. So the daughters shared this room. The eldest daughter got the front, with a little bed. She was 22, so she also had a little bit of privacy. And the 2 younger daughters, who were 6 and 10, shared the back bedroom, which had this one big bed. Cool little interjection in this room is the 2 dolls. They're actually Berlin, German-made porcelain dolls, and they have real human hair, which was quite common for the time period. Across the hall from the girls, we have the boys' bedroom. So this is again, had 4 sons. The eldest was 20, the youngest was 8. And they shared this room. So during the summers, and the spring and the fall, the 2 elder boys would often travel with their father on surveying work. They were apprenticed by him. And the 2 younger ones would get the nice big beds themselves, During the winter, everyone kind of had to smush in. But that's also okay because the added warmth would help keep you warm because the winter's not very, very cold here. Moving down the hall. We have the master bedroom. The master bedroom is the nicest bedroom in the house, and it's decorated thus to, again, impress your guests. So while the guests wouldn't stay in here, people being people would probably be nosy, so they might poke their noses in and have a look if they're staying in the guest bedroom, and they'd be greeted with a very nice bedroom. One of my favorite pieces in the house is this cup over here. If we raise the camera to see over the lip, we'll see the kind of the ribbon across the top, and it's called the mustache cup because men in the particularly the 1860s and 1870s really enjoyed having stylized waxed mustaches. But if you get waxed wet with hot tea, it's going to melt into the tea and also ruin your mustache. So to protect both, you have a little stretch to protect it. Our next room, just in front of me, is the filling room, which doubles as the hired girl's bedroom. The hired girl's name was Catherine Flynn, and she was born in Ireland. She came to Canada around 1847, which our research has shown, which means she was a refugee from the Irish potato famine. Her family was quite poor, which is why she ended up working, but she was a talented seamstress who made clothes for the women of the family. Now, in 1850, you couldn't walk to the store and buy clothes for women. You'd have to have them made using fabric you purchased or made. So that was her job. Men's clothes you can mostly buy. So she made men their clothes, but she'd have to make them outright. And the last bedroom is the guest bedroom. The guest bedroom would be the second nicest room. Which is in some ways, so it has a sleigh bed, which is very fashionable and very nice style of bed, especially for the time period. It was also very expensive back then. So to have it in the spare room would be a statement of some wealth. Now the Gibsons weren't rich, but they were middle class, and they had aspirations to appear wealthy, which is part of why they have a very large home and why they have a well-fashioned guest bedroom. We head back downstairs. Ready to come to the bottom of the stairs, we're in the grand entry hall. So in the 1850s, this is the first area you'd see if you were a guest to the house. So they tried to have certain effects to make them look wealthier. So they have granited walls, which is a painted effect, trying to look like granite. And they also have a floor cloth, which is painted to look like tile. So it's a large piece of linen, painted like tile, then varnished, and then nailed down. It's almost like modern linoleum. It's kind of the floor you want at the price you can afford. Immediately to the left of coming in the front door is Mr. Gibson's office. Now, Mr. Gibson, as a surveyor, would want to have a nice looking office, because if you look prosperous, you look good at your job. So it's a room they spend on to make sure you have good equipment, good tools, good furniture, because again, if you ever come to the house looking to have them do work, looking prosperous meant looking like you were good at what you're doing. The most interesting tool, I think, is the chain on the desk. It's a gunter's chain, or surveyor's chain. It's 66 feet long, and using that you can find a mile, because a mile is 80 chains. A furlong is 10 chains, and an acre is 10 square chains. Amazing. Now, in his travels, he'd come back and make charts and maps of his areas that he looked at. And one of the things on the chart is Crown land reserves and clergy reserves. Now, clergy reserves are one of the causes of the Upper Canada Rebellion in 1837, because 1/7 of all land in the province was given as a sort of tithe to the Church of England. Now, for Mr. Gibson, who was Presbyterian, for Mrs. Gibson, who was Methodist,
for all the Irish who were mostly Catholics, and all the other denominations, Methodists, etc., this was seen as greatly unjust, and even members of the Church of England, many of them thought that the church should be supported by its parishioners, not by the government. There should be a separation of church and state. So that was one of the issues that led to the Upper Canada Rebellion. Others were corruption in government, kind of a really ill-suited lieutenant governor in Sir Francis Bondhead. But in 1837, before this house was built, Mr. Gibson became a rebel, and he marched against the government. We'll talk about that a little bit in the dining room. So this is our dining room. It'd be one of the nicest rooms in the house, definitely the nicest room downstairs. And it's where a lot of the nicer furniture sort of lives. So some items that were original to the Gibsons include the sideboard, which is an imitation of a Jackson Hay piece of furniture that wasn't actually made by that illustrious manufacturer. And also the tall case clock here in the very dark corner. So in 1837, Mr. Gibson joined the rebellion. The short version is the rebels marched down, tried to seize government, failed. 2 days later, on December 7th, the government forces marched against the rebels, crushed them utterly, and sent them into flight. So Mr. Gibson escaped. He ran away, and eventually got to the United States. But for Mrs. Gibson, it was a little bit worse, or a lot worse. So on the evening of December 7th, or late afternoon, we don't know the exact time, but the militia was ordered by the governor, Sir Francis Bondhead, to burn down the Gibsons' home. James Fitzgibbon, who was a military officer, tried to resist it, but the governor was firm and ordered the house burned. So the militia marched up, burned the house to the ground, and slaughtered most of the animals on the property. Mrs. Gibson, we don't know exactly the chain of events, but she somehow got either news ahead or was given time to get some things out. So she was able to save Mr. Gibson's tools, their papers, maybe some of their money, but she also managed to save the face and mechanism of the clock. So she pulled it out of the clock body, wrapped it in a blanket, and ran it out. Now they bought a new clock body for it later, but you can see it doesn't quite fit the artwork. You can't entirely see. The edges of the clock are cut off. So that's a legacy of having to save it in a very, very quick manner. Mrs. Gibson didn't hear from Mr. Gibson until February or March of the next year, so about 3 months. But fortunately, he did survive. He was okay, and he told her to bring the kids down to New York. Now, for some reason, the government never seized the property, so they still maintained ownership. So Mrs. Gibson traveled back and forth collecting rents on it, so that 10 years later, in 1848, when they decided to come back to Canada, it was there for them to come back to. And they built this house that we're in now in 1851, and it stayed in the family until 1920. It was sold, went to a couple different families, and then became a museum in 1971.
Wow, very, very nice. I'm very impressed with the tour. I want to thank you, Michael, for a very good tour.
You're very welcome.
Yes. And again, I'm Howard Paul Short of the Gibson House. When you come to Toronto, Ontario, Canada, please come and visit. Have a great day. Bye-bye.